Hi, and welcome back. And in this video we're going to have a look at the effect of language on our emotion. The language we use actually affects how we feel. I want you to listen to some sentences I'm going to read now, and I want you to notice how you feel as I say them, and what kind of impression comes over to you from what I'm saying. So listen in and just notice the effect that these have on you. I notice I will feel terrible when I go out and do this. I can't do it. It will all go wrong. It won't work. It's a complete disaster. So, what are your thoughts about those sentences? Now, you probably found that they were negative and probably made you feel a bit down as well, which happens to a lot of people. And they're what we call negative certainties. So if we have a look at them again, what you'll see is they're not just negative, but their negativity, I suppose, is actually certain. So let's just run back through them. It's a disaster. So it's not just that it is a disaster, it's a complete fait accompli. There's no question. It won't work. You see, it just won't work. It will all go wrong, so it's certain about that. I can't do it. You see how certain that is? I can't. I know I will feel terrible when I go out and do it. I know. So as you can see, they're all negative certainties as we flick back through them. And that's why we call them negative certainties. So now I want you to listen to these, and I want you to notice how these sentences, whilst apparently the same sentences, actually are different. So just listen in and notice how you feel about these. I might feel terrible when I go out and do it. I might not be able to do it. It could go wrong. It may not work. And it may be a disaster. So what are your thoughts about those, and how are those different from the negative certainties? Okay, these are called negative possibilities. So as you'll see in the last one, rather than it is a disaster, which is completely certain, there's kind of a light at the end of the tunnel with this one. It may be a disaster. So it's still negative, but there's a possibility that something else might happen, which is why we call them negative possibilities. And they feel very different. It's not as heavy and not as certain and not as damning as the negative certainties. It is a disaster. It may be a disaster. It allows for something else to happen. Now, the first ones, the it is a disaster, is what we call catastrophization. And if you remember that from the polarization video that we talked about, this is a little bit more realistic because you don't know something is going to be a disaster. You don't know whether it actually is a disaster. And for me, a definition from the background I come from is a disaster involves dead people, so people have been killed. So unless you're in those kinds of situations, it probably isn't a disaster. However, that's a side issue here. So just lifting up from negative certainties, being aware of the negative certainties that you use and lifting them into negative possibilities will make you feel better. So I'm just going to read those sentences again, but it's different again, and I just want you to notice how you feel. So listening to these. Actually, I might feel okay when I go and do it. I might be able to do it. It could go okay. It may work, and it may be useful. Now, these are what we call positive possibilities. So they're positive, it may be useful, but there's a possibility that something else might happen, and probably a little bit more kind of realistic. Now, there's an issue with these things. What this isn't about is you zooming across to the other end of this, as you'll see in a moment, and just being positive. And you'll see there's a strategy towards this. Now, I'm going to read those sentences again, and I just want you to notice how you feel and how different these sentences are to any of the others. I will feel good when I go out and do it. I can do it. It will be fine. It will work. It's going to be brilliant. And these, as you've probably guessed, are positive certainties. So I'll just show you these in relationship to each other. So on the left here, we've got what we call negative emotional induction language, because it induces a negative emotion. So negative certainties, as we've explored, and negative possibilities. And then on the other side, we have positive emotion induction language with the positive possibilities and the positive certainties. Now, the issue here is that if you find that in your daily life you're tending to concentrate on negative certainties, and that's the language you're using, and you've already experienced what that makes you feel like and how that alters your emotion, the plan here is not to zoom over to the other side, so not to suddenly start on positive certainties, so go from it's a disaster to it's going to be great. The reason for that is that your 2-year-old won't believe you. So you'll go, hey, this is going to be brilliant, and inside your 2-year-old's going, yeah, right. So what you need to do is make it believable, so you move it up to the next level. So if you're using mainly negative certainties, the first job is to find out that you are using the negative certainties, and then just move it up to a negative possibility. So if you're saying something like, this is terrible, then all I want you to do is just move it up to, this could be terrible. And it's just moving it up a bit and giving that, the possibility again. And you'll notice a change in how you feel. But just remember, whatever you say and whatever you move it up to, your 2-year-old has to believe it. As I said before, if you suddenly launch into positive certainties by saying everything's brilliant, your 2-year-old's just going to go, yeah, right. Yeah, it just won't believe it. So we've got to make it believable. Now, I want to move on, and I'm going to read a sentence, and I want you to read this sentence out aloud after me. And I want you to notice how you start to feel when you do, and what happens inside. So bring your attention inside, particularly down to your stomach, your lower abdomen. And I'm going to say it first, and then I want you to repeat it aloud and notice what happens inside. I am starting to feel more and more nervous. So you repeat it now. And what happens? Virtually everybody starts to feel the tingling of anxiety in their stomach, down in the lower parts of their stomach, and it's very common. And all you've done, look around, there's nothing happening. All you've done is say a sentence that is that in front of you. So I'm going to read another sentence, and I want you to repeat this sentence aloud, and I want you to notice how you start to feel. Actually, I'm feeling calmer and calmer. So you repeat it now, aloud, and notice what happens inside. Things start to calm down. And this is the power of the language has on our emotions. So, this is your homework. For the next 24 to 48 hours, I want you to notice what kind of language you and others are using. Are you using negative certainties, or negative possibilities, or positive possibilities, or positive certainties? Then what I want you to do, so just do that for 24 to 48 hours. Once you've just noticed the language, because that's a skill in itself, noticing what language patterns you're using, then I want you to move your language up one. So if you're using mainly negative certainties, just move it up as often as possible, and the more you catch yourself doing this, the more it'll get into a habit, into negative possibilities. And then when you notice that you're using mainly negative possibilities, then move it up one to positive possibilities. And you'll start to feel a whole lot better. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.